The palace hall shimmered with an ethereal glow, its golden walls reflecting the soft light of countless floating orbs that hovered like tiny suns. The air hummed with a strange energy, as if the very fabric of reality bent to accommodate the extraordinary beings gathered within. At the center of it all stood Captain Elias Drake, a human soldier whose presence seemed almost out of place amidst the alien grandeur. His armor bore the scars of countless battles, and his face carried the weight of years spent fighting for survival in the vastness of space. Elias had never imagined himself standing here, in the heart of the royal palace of Zentrix 4, surrounded by creatures so different yet somehow familiar. Their elongated limbs moved with a grace that defied human comprehension, while their luminous skin radiated colors he couldn't name. But none of them held his attention like Queen Saraphina, the ruler of this world. She descended from her throne, a massive structure made of crystalline material that refracted light into dazzling patterns, and approached him with a regal poise that commanded respect. Her beauty was otherworldly, her features too perfect to be real. Her eyes glimmered like twin galaxies, holding secrets older than time itself. A delicate crown rested atop her head, adorned with gemstones that pulsed faintly, as though alive. Every step she took resonated through the chamber, not because of noise but because of the sheer power she exuded. The crowd of advisors, nobles, and guards parted silently before her, creating a path straight to Elias. He felt every pair of eyes on him, their gazes burning into his soul, yet he couldn't look away from the queen. As she drew closer, Elias noticed how her flowing robes seemed to defy gravity, swirling around her like liquid starlight. There was something mesmerizing about the way she moved, calm, deliberate, and utterly confident. When she finally stopped mere inches away, he realized just how small he felt in comparison. Not physically, but spiritually. This was no ordinary being. This was someone who commanded galaxies with a single word. And then she spoke. Her voice was unlike anything Elias had ever heard. It wasn't loud or demanding, but it carried a weight that silenced even the whispers of those around them. "Would you marry someone like me, human?" she asked, her words hanging in the air like a challenge and an invitation all at once. For a moment, Elias thought he might have misheard her. Surely, this was some kind of test, or worse, a cruel joke played upon him by these enigmatic aliens. But when he looked into her eyes, there was no mockery there, only sincerity. His mind raced, trying to process what she meant and why she would ask such a question in front of everyone. Was this part of some diplomatic ritual? Or did she genuinely mean it? Before he could respond, the room erupted into murmurs. Some sounded shocked, others intrigued, and a few even outraged. Yet none dared interrupt the moment between the queen and the soldier. Elias swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the cool air. Whatever answer he gave now would define not just his fate but possibly the future of humanity's fragile alliance with the people of Zentrix 4. Captain Elias Drake had grown up in the shadow of war, his childhood marked by the constant threat of invasion and destruction. Born on one of Earth's outer colonies, he'd witnessed firsthand the devastation wrought by interstellar conflicts. His parents were farmers who lost everything when a neighboring planet fell under siege, forcing their family to flee with nothing but the clothes on their backs. From that day forward, Elias vowed to fight, not just for survival, but for justice. Military training came naturally to him. Where others struggled with discipline, Elias thrived, finding solace in structure and purpose. By the age of 25, he'd risen through the ranks faster than anyone expected, earning both respect and suspicion from his peers. Some admired his tactical brilliance, others whispered that his success stemmed from recklessness rather than skill. But Elias didn't care what they thought. All that mattered was protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. His reputation as a fearless leader grew after the Battle of Orion's Veil, where he led a daring mission to evacuate civilians trapped behind enemy lines. Against overwhelming odds, Elias managed to save over 500 lives, including children who still sent him letters of gratitude decades later. That victory cemented his status as a hero among humans, though it also earned him enemies among rival factions who saw him as a symbol of Earth's defiance. Despite his victories, Elias carried deep scars, both visible and invisible. A jagged line ran across his left cheek, a souvenir from a close encounter with a plasma blade during a skirmish on Titan Prime. More painful were the memories of comrades lost in battle, faces etched forever in his mind. Each loss weighed heavily on him, fueling a quiet determination to ensure their sacrifices weren't in vain. Over time, he became known not just for his courage but for his unwavering sense of duty. Yet beneath the hardened exterior lay a man burdened by loneliness. Years spent traveling between stars left little room for personal connections. Relationships faltered under the strain of long absences and dangerous missions. Love, he often told himself, was a luxury soldiers couldn't afford. Still, moments of doubt crept in late at night when the silence pressed too heavily against his thoughts. Did he truly believe that? Or was it easier to convince himself than to risk opening his heart again? Now, standing before Queen Saraphina, Elias felt the full weight of his past bearing down on him. Here was someone who embodied everything he'd fought against: power, privilege, and an existence so far removed from his own struggles. And yet, there was something undeniably compelling about her. Something that made him question whether his carefully constructed worldview might be incomplete. The murmurs in the hall grew louder, pulling Elias back to the present. He glanced around, seeing faces filled with curiosity, judgment, and disbelief. For a fleeting second, he wondered if this was some elaborate scheme designed to humiliate him. But one look at Saraphina's steady gaze dispelled that notion. Whatever her motives, she wasn't mocking him. If anything, she seemed vulnerable. Queen Saraphina's decision to approach Elias hadn't been impulsive. For weeks, she had observed him from afar, studying his movements, listening to his words during negotiations, and piecing together fragments of his life through the stories shared by diplomats and soldiers alike. There was something about him that intrigued her, an unshakable resolve paired with a quiet vulnerability that reminded her of herself centuries ago, before the weight of leadership hardened her spirit. Saraphina's own journey to the throne had been fraught with challenges. Born into royalty, she inherited not just a crown but the expectations of an entire civilization. Her people, the Elias, revered her lineage but demanded perfection. From a young age, she was groomed to rule, taught to suppress emotion and prioritize logic above all else. Yet beneath the polished facade of a sovereign, Saraphina harbored doubts. She often questioned whether she was truly fit to lead, especially when faced with decisions that pitted morality against necessity. As queen, she had made sacrifices most humans couldn't fathom. To maintain peace among the fractious clans of Zentrix 4, she brokered alliances through marriage, binding herself to powerful leaders whose values clashed with her own. These unions were not born of love but of strategy, each one leaving her more isolated than the last. Over time, she learned to wear a mask of indifference, concealing the ache of loneliness that gnawed at her soul. Her advisors praised her strength, but they failed to see the toll it took. What drew her to Elias was his authenticity. In a court filled with calculated smiles and veiled intentions, he stood apart, a man unafraid to show his scars, both physical and emotional. His presence challenged her carefully constructed barriers, forcing her to confront feelings she had long buried. Perhaps it was foolish to entertain such thoughts, given their vastly different worlds, but Saraphina couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. When she whispered her question, "Would you marry someone like me, human?" It wasn't merely a whim or a political maneuver. It was a plea disguised as a challenge, a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm between them. Could someone like Elias understand the burdens of leadership? Would he see beyond her title and recognize the woman beneath? As the murmurs swirled around them, Saraphina braced herself for his response, unsure whether she feared rejection or acceptance more. Elias opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His mind raced, grappling with the enormity of the situation. Marriage to an alien queen? The idea was absurd, impossible even. Yet, as he stared into Saraphina's luminous eyes, he felt an undeniable connection, a spark of understanding that transcended language and species. He wanted to say yes, to leap into the unknown with reckless abandon. But the weight of responsibility held him back. How could he commit to such a union without considering the consequences for humanity? What would Earth's leaders think? Would they see him as a traitor or a savior? The murmurs in the hall grew louder, punctuated by gasps and whispers. Some of the Elias nobles exchanged disapproving glances, their expressions betraying shock and disdain. Others leaned in eagerly, clearly fascinated by the unfolding drama. A tall advisor with shimmering silver hair stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Your Majesty," he said sharply, addressing Saraphina, This is unprecedented. Such a union could destabilize our alliances. Saraphina turned to him, her gaze cold yet composed. My decisions are my own, she replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. The advisor bowed stiffly and retreated, though his scowl suggested the matter was far from settled. Meanwhile, a group of human delegates stationed near the entrance exchanged nervous looks. One of them, a wiry diplomat named Commander Hale, approached Elias cautiously. Captain, he muttered under his breath, you can't seriously be considering this. I'm not sure what I'm considering, Elias admitted, his voice barely audible. But I won't let fear dictate my choices. Hale frowned but said nothing further, retreating to confer with the other humans. Their hushed conversation carried undertones of panic, as though they were already planning contingencies for whatever Elias might decide. Amid the chaos, Elias caught sight of a young Luminalese girl peeking out from behind a pillar. Her wide eyes locked onto his, filled with wonder rather than judgment. She smiled shyly before darting away, leaving Elias with a pang of clarity. This wasn't just about politics or alliances, it was about trust, courage, and the willingness to embrace the unknown. But even as the realization dawned on him, doubt lingered. Could he truly rise to the occasion, or would he crumble under the pressure? The tension in the hall reached a fever pitch as Elias hesitated, his silence stretching into an eternity. Saraphina stood before him, her expression unreadable, though her fingers twitched slightly, a rare sign of unease. Around them, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation, the collective breath of the crowd held captive by the moment. The floating orbs of light dimmed momentarily, as if mirroring the uncertainty in the room. From the corner of his eye, Elias noticed movement. A contingent of Luminalese guards shifted positions subtly, their glowing weapons now angled slightly inward toward the Queen. Were they preparing to intervene? Or was this merely protocol? Elias couldn't tell, but the subtle change sent a chill down his spine. His instincts screamed at him to act, to either accept or reject Saraphina's offer decisively, but his tongue remained heavy, paralyzed by indecision. Commander Hale reappeared, this time accompanied by two other human officers. They formed a loose semicircle around Elias, their body language protective yet tense. We need to discuss this privately, Hale urged, his voice low but urgent. Before Elias could respond, Saraphina raised her hand, silencing the room with a single gesture. Her gaze swept over the humans, lingering briefly on Hale before returning to Elias. Captain Drake, she said, her voice carrying an edge of authority, I will not force your hand. But know this, my offer is sincere, and its implications extend far beyond us. Your answer will shape the future of both our peoples. The gravity of her words hung in the air, amplifying the stakes. Elias clenched his fists, his knuckles whitening beneath his gloves. He felt torn between duty and desire, between caution and courage. The murmurs around him blurred into a distant hum as he wrestled with his thoughts. Finally, he took a step forward, closing the gap between himself and the Queen. Your Majesty, he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within, I need time to consider your proposal. A ripple of surprise spread through the crowd. Some nodded approvingly, interpreting his request as a sign of wisdom. Others muttered darkly, clearly dissatisfied with the lack of resolution. Saraphina studied him intently, her lips curving into the faintest hint of a smile. Time is a luxury we may not have, she replied softly, though her tone betrayed no anger. But I will grant it, for now. With that, she turned and ascended the steps to her throne, her movements graceful yet deliberate. The room remained frozen, suspended in the aftermath of her declaration. Elias exhaled slowly, realizing he had bought himself a reprieve, but only temporarily. As the humans retreated to a side chamber to strategize, and the Luminalese nobles dispersed into animated clusters, the weight of the moment settled heavily on his shoulders. Whatever choice he made next would echo across galaxies, altering the course of history forever. The side chamber where Elias and the human delegation gathered felt suffocating despite its vastness. The walls shimmered faintly, reflecting the dim light of a single luminescent orb hovering above them. Commander Hale paced back and forth, his boots clicking against the polished floor, while two other officers, Lieutenant Maravas and Captain Ren Callahan, sat rigidly at the table, their faces etched with concern. Elias stood apart from them, leaning against the wall as if trying to distance himself from the storm brewing in the room. "This is madness," Hale snapped, breaking the tense silence. "Do you realize what's at stake here? If you accept her proposal, Earth will see it as betrayal. If you refuse, we risk alienating the Luminalese entirely. Either way, humanity loses." Elias didn't respond immediately. His gaze was fixed on the glowing orb, its pulsating light casting shadows that danced across the metallic surface of the table. He could feel their eyes on him, waiting for answers he didn't have. Finally he spoke, his voice low but steady. "It's not just about us. Not anymore. This isn't some political chess game. It's bigger than that. Saraphina. She's offering something more. Something I don't fully understand yet. Something more." Voss interjected sharply, her tone laced with skepticism. "Captain, forgive me, but this sounds like reckless idealism. You're talking about marrying an alien queen, a being whose motives we can't begin to fathom. How do we even know this isn't a trap?" "She's right," Callahan added, rubbing his temples as though warding off a headache. "We've seen how these alliances work. They're never equal. If you say yes, you'll be giving up everything. Your rank, your freedom, maybe even your humanity. Is that really worth it?" Elias pushed off the wall and stepped toward the table, his jaw tightening. "I'm not saying it's simple. But think about it. This could be our chance to forge a real connection with the Luminalese. Not just treaties or trade agreements, but trust. Real trust. Isn't that what we've been fighting for all along?" Hale stopped pacing and turned to face him, his expression grim. "Trust doesn't win wars, Elias. Strength does. And right now, we're walking into territory we don't control. What happens when Earth finds out? Do you honestly believe they'll support this? Or will they brand you a traitor and cut ties completely?" The weight of Hale's words hit hard, but Elias refused to back down. "Then let them call me whatever they want. I didn't come here to play politics. I came here because people are dying out there, human and Luminalese alike, and no one seems willing to take the first step toward peace. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the bridge we need." For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the orb overhead, its light flickering slightly as if mirroring the tension in the room. Then Voss leaned forward, her sharp features softening ever so slightly. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" she asked quietly. Elias met her gaze without flinching. "I don't know what I'm going to do yet. But I won't make a decision based on fear, or because someone tells me I should." Callahan sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. "Fine. Let's say you go through with it. What then? You marry her, become part of their world. And what? Abandon your own. We need leaders like you, Elias. Humanity needs you. And maybe the Luminalese need me too," Elias countered. "Maybe both sides need someone who's willing to stand in the middle and hold them together. Someone who understands what it means to fight for survival, and what it means to hope for something better." The conversation stretched on, each argument pulling Elias in different directions. By the time they emerged from the chamber, his mind was still a battlefield of conflicting thoughts. As they re-entered the main hall, the crowd parted once again, their stares heavy with expectation. Saraphina stood near her throne, watching him approach with an unreadable expression. For a brief moment, Elias allowed himself to imagine what life might look like beside her. A life filled with challenges, yes, but also possibilities beyond anything he'd ever dreamed of. But the doubts lingered, whispering warnings of consequences he couldn't foresee. What price would he pay for stepping onto this uncharted path? And would it truly bring peace, or only more conflict? As Elias moved closer to Saraphina, the murmurs of the crowd faded into a distant hum, replaced by the rhythmic pounding of his own heartbeat. Her presence was magnetic, drawing him in despite the chaos swirling around them. She stood tall, her luminous skin casting a soft glow that seemed to push back the shadows of doubt creeping at the edges of his mind. When their eyes met, Elias felt a strange calm wash over him, as though the universe itself had paused to witness this pivotal moment. "You've taken your time," Saraphina said softly, her voice carrying a note of quiet patience. Have you reached a decision, Captain Drake? Elias hesitated, his throat dry as he searched for the right words. Your Majesty, he began, choosing each syllable carefully. What you're asking, it's not something I can answer lightly. It's not just my life at stake, it's the lives of countless others. I need to know more. About you, about your people, about what this union would mean. Saraphina tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. And yet, you hesitate not out of fear, but out of responsibility. That speaks volumes about your character, Elias. She paused, her gaze softening. Very well. Ask me anything. I will answer truthfully. The offer caught Elias off guard, and for a moment, he faltered. Questions swirled in his mind, tangled threads of curiosity and caution. Finally, he found his voice. Why me? Out of everyone here, why did you choose to ask me? A faint smile touched Saraphina's lips, lighting up her galaxy-like eyes. Because you are unlike anyone I have ever encountered. Your courage is matched only by your compassion. You carry the scars of war, yet you refuse to let bitterness consume you. In a court filled with calculated moves and hidden agendas, you stand as a beacon of authenticity. That is rare and precious. Her words struck a chord deep within him, stirring emotions he hadn't dared to acknowledge. Yet, even as warmth spread through his chest, a new question surfaced. If I were to say yes, if I agreed to this, what would it mean for my people? Would they see it as betrayal? Would they turn their backs on us? Saraphina's expression grew somber, the weight of centuries of leadership evident in her gaze. There will be resistance, from both our peoples. Change always invites fear. But I believe that together, we could build a bridge, a foundation of trust strong enough to withstand the storms ahead. It won't be easy, Elias. There will be sacrifices. But the alternative? She trailed off, letting the unspoken implication hang in the air. Elias nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Another thought pressed urgently against his mind. What about you? What do you gain from this? Surely, there are others among your kind who could offer you more power, stability, alliances without risk. Saraphina's smile faded, replaced by a vulnerability that took Elias by surprise. What I seek cannot be measured in power or wealth. I yearn for connection, for someone who sees me not as a queen, but as a being capable of love, of pain, of hope. Someone who understands the burden of leadership and shares the desire to create a better future. Do you think I am foolish for wanting such a thing? No, Elias replied without hesitation. I think you're brave. Their gazes locked, and in that fleeting moment, Elias felt the boundaries between their worlds blur. The murmurs of the crowd, the weight of expectations, the looming uncertainties, all of it seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them standing in the vast expanse of possibility. But reality was quick to intrude. A sudden commotion erupted near the entrance of the hall, snapping their attention back to the present. A group of Elias guards rushed forward, their weapons drawn, surrounding a lone figure who had forced his way inside. The man was human, his disheveled appearance and wild eyes marking him as someone driven by desperation. He shouted something incoherent, his voice cracking with emotion. "Stay back!" one of the guards barked, raising a glowing blade toward the intruder. But before they could act, Saraphina raised her hand, signaling for restraint. "Let him speak," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The man staggered forward, his gaze locking onto Elias. "Captain Drake!" he cried, his voice trembling. "They're coming. The coalition, they've breached the outer sectors. They're targeting Zentrix 4. The announcement sent shockwaves through the hall. Gasps rippled through the crowd as panic began to take hold. Elias straightened, his soldier's instincts kicking in instantly. "How many ships?" he demanded, striding toward the man. "Too many," the intruder replied, shaking his head. "They're using experimental weaponry. We don't have much time." Elias turned to Saraphina, his heart pounding. Whatever decision he had been grappling with now seemed insignificant compared to the immediate threat facing both their peoples. "Your Majesty," he said firmly. "We need to act. Now." Saraphina's expression hardened, her regal composure returning in full force. "Summon the council," she ordered, her voice ringing with authority. "Prepare the defenses. And you, Captain Drake." She paused, meeting his gaze with unwavering resolve. "Will you stand with us?" Elias didn't hesitate. "Always." As the hall erupted into organized chaos, Elias realized that the choice before him had shifted. The question was no longer whether he would marry the Queen, it was whether he could rise to the challenge of protecting the fragile alliance they were building. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: the fate of two worlds now rested on his shoulders. The palace transformed into a hive of activity as the Luminalese and humans worked side by side to prepare for the impending attack. The Coalition's forces were vast, their experimental weaponry capable of devastating entire fleets in moments. Yet, amidst the chaos, Elias found himself at the center of an unexpected unity. Saraphina had declared him her co-commander, granting him authority over joint operations between their peoples. It was a bold move, one that silenced many doubters, though not all. As they strategized in the war room, Elias felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. Maps of the surrounding sectors floated holographically above the table, dotted with red markers indicating enemy positions. Saraphina stood beside him, her poise unwavering even as reports poured in about the growing threat. Together, they devised a plan, a coordinated ambush using the natural asteroid fields near Zentrix 4 to mask their movements while deploying both human and Luminalese technology in tandem. "You trust me with this," Elias said quietly during a rare moment of calm, glancing at Saraphina as she studied the holographic display. "Why?" She turned to him, her luminous eyes reflecting a mix of determination and something softer: gratitude. "Because I see in you what my people need. Someone who fights not just for victory, but for peace. Trust is earned, Elias, and you've given me no reason to doubt you." Her words bolstered his resolve, though the stakes remained perilously high. As the battle loomed closer, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation would define not only their survival but also the future of their alliance, and perhaps their bond. When the Coalition fleet arrived, it was like a storm erupting from the void. Massive ships bristling with cannons descended upon Zentrix 4, their engines casting eerie shadows across the planet's surface. The defenders launched their counterattack, weaving through the asteroid field with precision. Human fighters darted alongside Luminalese vessels, their combined tactics creating a dazzling dance of light and destruction. Elias led the charge in a sleek hybrid fighter, its design blending Earth's engineering with Luminalese energy cores. Through the cockpit's viewport, he could see Saraphina commanding from a flagship vessel, her presence radiating strength even from afar. They communicated constantly, their voices steady despite the chaos around them. "This is it," Elias radioed to her as the Coalition's flagship emerged from the fray, its weapons charging for a devastating strike. "We take them down now or lose everything." "I'm with you," Saraphina replied, her voice firm. Together. The final assault was harrowing. Elias's squadron drew the enemy's fire, luring them into a trap set within the densest part of the asteroid field. Meanwhile, Saraphina's forces unleashed a barrage of crystalline missiles, their payloads designed to disrupt the Coalition's advanced systems. Explosions lit up the void as ship after ship fell victim to the ambush. In the climactic moment, Elias piloted his craft straight toward the Coalition's flagship, dodging incoming fire with every ounce of skill he possessed. With Saraphina coordinating support strikes, he managed to disable the enemy's main weapon just as it prepared to fire on Zentrix 4. The flagship crumbled under the combined assault, its destruction sending shockwaves through the remaining fleet. One by one, the Coalition ships retreated, leaving behind a battlefield littered with debris. Back on the palace grounds, the survivors gathered to celebrate their improbable victory. The once pristine halls bore scars from the conflict, but the spirit of unity among the humans and Luminalese shone brighter than ever. Elias stood beside Saraphina on a balcony overlooking the courtyard, where soldiers and civilians alike mingled, sharing stories and laughter. "You did it," Saraphina said, turning to him with a smile that made her glow even more radiant. "You saved us." "We saved each other," Elias corrected, his voice warm. "This wasn't just my fight, it was ours." Saraphina reached out, placing her hand gently over his. "And now, What will you do next? Elias hesitated only for a moment before speaking. I think it's time I stopped running from the unknown. If you'll still have me, Your Majesty, I'd like to try building something together. Something real. Tears glistened in Saraphina's eyes, though her smile never wavered. Then let it be known, she announced, raising her voice so all could hear, that Captain Elias Drake has agreed to stand beside me, not just as a leader, but as my partner. Let this day mark the beginning of a new era, where our peoples are united not by treaties, but by trust. Cheers erupted from below, echoing through the palace and beyond. As Elias and Saraphina stood hand in hand, surrounded by those who had fought and bled for this moment, Elias felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He had faced fear, doubt, and danger, but in doing so, he had found purpose, love, and hope. And as the stars twinkled above, casting their eternal light over Zentrix 4, Elias knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For the first time in his life, he truly believed in the possibility of a better future, for humanity, for the Luminolese, and for himself.